So what's up people, and welcome to another Battle Angel Alita Mars Chronicle video. Now this is a continuation video from mostly the Necrosoldier video that I did a while back. If you recall, the video was titled "What's So Special About Necrosoldiers?" And mostly this is a continuation from that due to the comments that many of you provided. But it actually goes a little bit further than that into the history of Mars, as well as even the immortal Nostrum. Yes, we're bringing that back again. Yeah, I'm gonna duck before you throw things at me. But yeah, there was some very interesting comments that many of you brought up in the last video. And it started tying many of the things together. And so what I thought was that I would make this video to try to summarize some of this. Now, this was actually quite difficult in doing because of the fact that many of the explanations you provided were quite complex and diverse. And so I will apologize right from the beginning in that I may not properly bring out the information. And if there are any questions or comments to the comments that I make in this video, then please, provide it in the comments section below. Now, amongst the commenters, I especially want to thank three. One was a gentleman named Gala, one was Stoppskylten, and one was Reuben Ramirez. And so thank you very much for your very detailed comments. Many of you often provide some really detailed comments, so I really do appreciate that. And within there, I especially do want to focus on Gala. He brought out some very detailed explanations that go, again, beyond just the Necrosoldiers, and potentially may go back into the immortal Nostrum and provide a little bit of tie to a lot of the things that are kind of floating around like loose ends in the story at the moment. Now, many of you others, the other two, also provided a lot of that comment. Now, Gala's comment was in a video that wasn't a Battle Angel Alita video. It was in my please be safe from this virus situation that's going on sort of video. And so I will leave a link because it was quite a detailed comment. And instead of listening to the video after linking, go down to the comment and look for his. And take a look at it. I think it's a very extensive explanation. And so anyway, I did want to summarize a lot of the stuff here. And as always, before I begin, I would like to give my spoiler alert. Just like with the Ancient Mars Treasures videos, just like with the Immortal Nostrum videos, and the Necrosoldier videos, this is another deep discussion on Mars Chronicle. And so if you haven't watched those videos because you were worried that you were going to be spoiled, then I would suggest that you turn off this video as well, because this falls in line with a lot of the things that were discussed in the previous videos. However, if you were fine with listening to those previous videos, then I would say this probably again falls in line. So even if there is spoilers, it seems like you have already made the decision that you don't mind being spoiled if you haven't read Mars Chronicle. And if you have read Mars Chronicle, there's no spoilers. Okay, so that's my default spoiler alert. And as always, please watch at your discretion. Now, before I begin, as much as I am summarizing, I will put some of my own input in. This is a lot of information from Gala, Reuben Ramirez, and Stoppskylten. So please credit them for a lot of the information that I will discuss today. Okay, so Necrosoldiers. Let's start with that because that's where we left off in the last video. And many of you explained it a little bit more, and I thank you for this. You know, the majority of the technology falls not in the body, but in the brain. Although there is a resurrection, I don't know if much of that is tied to the Necrosoldier technology. You could bring it out through other processes that you have seen in the past, and we've talked about that in the previous video, how similar it is to a lot of the technology that we've already read in the story. But the technology of the Necrosoldiers seems to be somewhat unique in that although you're resurrecting the brain, and although it is a natural entity, it does seem to be controlled by another entity. I called it the Puppet Master in the last video, and so I'll continue to call it that. But the difference again is that from what it sounds like, and many of you made this explanation and it makes a lot of sense, the Necrosoldier technology doesn't really just control a free will persona that's in the body, right? Yeah, it's different from, for example, what Desanova did with Gruishka and Vector in the movie, in the sense that they had free will, but they were controlled by this control entity. Here, from what it sounds like and what is suggested, and it makes sense, is that the actual persona is somewhere else. So it's stored in a different area, and it's kind of remotely brought into the brain of that deceased and resurrected body in a kind of a link, right? So unlike the free will that was in the body of the individual in the movie, here the free will is actually locked up in a separate location. And by doing so, even if you were able to break that control that you have with the Puppet Master, it won't actually give the freedom back to the individual like it would with Gruishka or Vector in the movie. What it will do is, since you broke the link, the individual will fall back down and be dead again. And so in that sense, the body itself is not alive. And the actual persona essence is in a separate area controlled by the Puppet Master. And that makes quite a bit of sense based upon, again, the various technologies that you see in the comic. Of course, there is the brain chip, and the brain chip, like brain chip Alita or Ito, right? They do have their own persona in there. But, of course, there is the separate brain that has the control. And to some extent, it was duplicated to create that persona. But what if that duplication didn't need to happen? What if the original persona from the brain, let's say the brain that was in the Melchizedek, right, was actually used to transfer that information down remotely to the body so that the body kept on living, but the essence was still up in the Melchizedek, right? So the brain chip is only there to receive the information so that you could actually keep on going. Now, we know in the comic that's not the case because of the fact that once Alita, the brain Alita, was resurrected, the two entities, brain chip Alita and brain Alita, went their own way. So brain chip Alita always had her personal identity. The ARs had their own personal identity. So you could have it such that the body can eventually store that personal essence. If you want to call it the soul, if you want to call it the essence, whatever, can be stored back to the body. But in this case, out of convenience, it's not being done that way. And the best way to think about that is to compare Zex and Chibi Zex, right? Zex is always running around with Chibi Zex, and it's basically his backup, right? Chibi Zex can bounce around and do things on its own, but it's actually being fully controlled by Zex. And Chibi Zex is always there in case Zex actually gets destroyed, in which case his entire essence gets transferred to Chibi Zex. And that's what we have seen in the comic, where Zex eventually sometimes becomes Chibi Zex and then eventually becomes Zex again once he gets a new body. And so if the essence can transfer from one body to another, and if, until that happens, Zex can control Chibi Zex remotely, then there is no reason why the people who own the Necrosoldier technology can't do the same. And maybe the technology is not just resurrecting a person, giving it the free will, and then, controlling them. Rather, it's more resurrecting the person, transferring the essence to someplace where they can fully control it so that the body will never have full freedom, and then use that as a leverage to continuously control the entity. And if that's the case, it's a lot more difficult technology for Alita to rescue Erica and Gert, for example. If she needs to find that essence, if she needs to be able to go there and transfer it to Erica before that break happens so that Erica doesn't die again, then it becomes more difficult, and I can understand why they may need Supernova's help to be able to do so, and I can understand why Supernova's like saying it's possible, but it's not easy. Now, aside from this information, there is also other information that comes up with regards to the Necrosoldier. One of them is a very important thing, which is that it happened, or this technology is about 200 years old, based upon the discussions that were going on in Mars Chronicle. And so we look back in 200 years, and assuming that it's a rough approximation to the nearest 100 years or so, so give or take 25 years or so, what happened 200 years ago? Well, 200 years ago was the terraforming wars, right? And it was around the time when Alita ended up in the junkyard after successfully completing Operation Malwolf. But if you assume that there's maybe a rough approximation and maybe about 16 to 20, 15 to 25 years of error in there, then that basically spans Alita's entire lifespan as Yoko at that time, right? She was around 16 years old or 18, somewhere around there, right? 16 to 18 years old when she performed Operation Malwolf. So if you look back and encompass all that, then there's several things that happened 200 years ago. One was the terraforming wars, one was Operation Malwolf, one was, of course, Alita ending up in the junkyard. But if you put in the air, then you could also include Alita's birth, right? And everything that happened between Yoko's birth, I should say, and Yoko's ending up in the junkyard. So what else happened during that time? And of course, one of them is the discovery of the immortal nostrum by Erica, Alita, or Yoko, and Baron Muster. And so if this Necrosoldier technology is around the time of the era when the immortal nostrum was discovered, is it tied to the immortal nostrum? It might be because of the fact that Yukito Kishiro tends to not just bring out coincidences, and there may be a situation that he is tying all of this together, and that's why he, instead of making this technology recent, he made this technology 200 years old. So we talked about what is the immortal nostrum, and one possibility, of course, was that it might contain methuselization. And if that's the case, maybe the Necrosoldier technology is an offshoot of methuselization. Now, what's interesting is, and thank you very much, Reuben John Ramirez, for bringing this up, is that, of course, Methuselization was discovered in the colony of Venus, right? They are the ones that developed it. And, of course, Alita, before she goes to Mars, after Last Order, goes to Venus. So is there a connection of her trying to learn and understand, the technology of Methuselization at Venus, so that then she could go and help out to resolve some of the Necrosoldier technology that's creating all these problems? By understanding the base technology, can she then help cure, the problems that Gert is having, or Erica is having, or, to be honest, all of the Einherjar, right? And bring her old comrades back to being her comrades again. And so that might be possible. And since Methuselization is, again, a possibility of extension of life, it does fall in line with what is going on with the Necrosoldier. And what's interesting is, if you actually take the idea that you are remotely controlling another body using the spirit that's in a certain location, then you could think of it as even partially stereotomy, right? So stereotomy is when one dies, you get resurrected again, and the entire spirit, or the essence, life essence, is then transported to that other individual, right, that gets resurrected. But we know that that doesn't always have to be the case, because Destinova goes wild every once in a while and just starts creating a bunch of Destinovas. And so there doesn't have to be that connection of having that certain life essence in there. And of course, we know that somewhere along the way, life essence can then be created in an artificial manner. Brain chip Alita is different from brain Alita, right? The original brain of Destinova and Ito is still somewhere in the Melchizedek. Yes, there is still another Ito out there, and there is still another Destinova, the originals, right, that are still in the Melchizedek. But so, coming back then, if you can do that, and we know that then you can lock that spiritual essence, life essence, or personality in a remote area, because we saw that with Portanova, then you could have a situation where you create a Portanova sort of technology against the free will of the individual, such as Erica or Gert, but then using the technology similar to what connects Zex to Chibi Zex, or even tuned Alita to Chibi Alita. You could do the same thing with Erica and Gert. And so this all then brings in the various technologies you're creating using Methuselization, possibly to resurrect the brain back, but you're also using potentially stereotomy to separate the life essence from the body. And then you're still using all that connecting technology that you already see in the story to link that persona to the body itself. And so the body does not have free will. The body is still, not the body, the essence does not have free will, right? The essence is still locked up, and the body is only a vessel that's receiving the commands or the signals from the essence, but not the essence itself. And so that would make the Necrosoldiers very unique as an individual to some of the other characters, such as Brain Chip Alita or Doc Ito or Nova, right? But at the same time, it's still plausible because we have seen other technologies use similar technologies separately, but they're combining it together to form this controllable entity. And so the question that, of course, comes up is who is controlling them? And again, thank you very much for a lot of the people out there who talked about this. And I agree with many of you people, because this part I did have my own thoughts about it as well. we talked about this a little bit in which one was it? Which video was it? I can't even remember which video it was. It was, why is Alita going to Venus? Also, it was also in, I think, the Immortal Nostrum video that I talked about Excalibur, right? And how Excalibur may be, a way to create AI in Mars. But let's take it one step further. What if AI already exists in Mars, right? We already know that one exists in Jupiter, and we have a good feeling that there may be one that exists in Venus. And so that is the other reason why Alita may have gone to Venus, and many of you have already mentioned that, right? Was to meet that other AI so that she could become the complete last order agent by getting the commands and the authorization from all the AIs. But authorization to do what? And so what if there is an AI in Mars? And what if it was a rogue AI, and that's why it created a little bit of problems for Merlin, for Zeus, and for potentially the AI in Venus. But they themselves can't go to that location to change things, and so they need a last order agent to do so, and Brain Chip Alita was brought to that, in which case there is a reason for Alita to go to Venus to, again, get their authorization and maybe even learn their technologies and whatever. And maybe it took 3 years because it took a lot of time to convince them that she was doing it for the greater good of not only humanity but also these AIs. And so maybe, coming back, if it's being controlled by Desane, who we don't know what it is or who it is, maybe Desane is the AI, and maybe she needs to go to defeat that AI so that law and order can come back to the system, right? The colonies. However, there may be another possibility, which is that there still is an AI, but it's not a rogue AI, but it is being controlled by a rogue individual, and that is Desane, right? So what if Desane is controlling the Mars AI the way Embody was controlling the Earth AI, Merlin, right? And if you recall, in the Mars Chronicle, they talk about Embody was actually potentially one of Desane's enemies because he was one of the few people who can protect and try to be able to take out Desane. He was a threat to Desane, right? And that's why, until all the calamity with Last Order happened and Embody was taken out, none of this was really done on the surface. But the moment Embody was taken out, it created the opportunity for Desane to actually rise to the surface and start doing its strategies. And of course, Karula Sanguis felt like she was a pawn because she was the one that, of course, killed Embody, thinking that she was doing it out of her own choice, but now she feels like she was just kind of coerced into it by Desane. So what if Desane is actually pulling a lot of these strings in the back and controlling the AI? So then the AI is a prisoner of this individual that's being used to create the Necrosoldiers that are then being sent out to do whatever Desane is needing. But maybe there is a way for the AI to be able to do things outside of Desane's control. It can't do anything by itself because Desane controls it, but maybe it's trying to coerce somebody, a chosen one, let's say. A chosen one by an oracle, let's say. A chosen one by an oracle who seems to have a very similar capability to somebody like Merlin, right? Merlin was a AI that would be able to predict the future, right? It was able to predict the coming of the geocatastrophe, and nobody listened to it, and that's why the Earth got destroyed. And it was the prediction capability that both Arthur Farrell and Umbadi used to be able to gain power. And of course, I got a feeling the same, maybe using the same reasoning with the AI. But so, if the AI in Mars also has that capability, doesn't that sound like the Oracle? And if the Oracle can predict the future the way Merlin can predict the future, then maybe the Oracle sees in Alita and Erica a similar capability. This person has the possibility of bringing a solution back to be able to free the AI from the same. Just like Merlin noticed that Alita had the capability to become a last agent so that she could go to Mars and resolve whatever situation that both Merlin and Zeus wanted. And if Merlin has that capability, I would say Zeus has that capability too. And since both of them agreed that that was the case, then why wouldn't the Mars AI also feel that this person is possible? And if that's the case, then you could understand why somewhere along the way Mui says that Alita is still a possibility, but Erica is a disappointment. Not because of the fact that Erica was incapable, but because of the fact that Erica has become a Necrosoldier. And of course, if the AI is the one that's controlling it by holding the life essence, just the way the Melchizedek is holding the life essence of Ito and the original Nova's brain, as well as for a while the brain Alita's brain, of course it would know that Erica has been defeated because of the fact that it's controlling Erica right now. And so if that's the case, much of this falls into place because of the fact that maybe a lot of this entire empire was created 200 years ago when the immortal Nostrum was discovered by Alita, Erica, and Baron Muster, right? And then somewhere along the way it disappeared, but it didn't get destroyed. What happened is it was used to create whatever it is, the technology that is now causing the problems that are being observed in Mars. And it's expanded so far that it's, brought its grasp into the Mars Kingdom Parliament with the situation that occurred with Queen Lamera. And it's also going out into space because it's affecting even the Stellar Nursery Society as we see from Kyrula Sanguis. And so then we can understand a lot of this information, right? And we start to understand why these priestesses, such as Mui, are around, because part of it is, of course, to keep the society of Mars from collapsing, right? So that it could keep on going. And that's why the Himmelsal is created as a network of these priestesses that change their body to souls. But there was a good discussion, I think it was Gala who brought this one out, which was that if Mui still exists, but her original form was turned into a Sol, then is Mui a brain chip version of her original self? In which case, does that sort of technology exist in Mars just like it does in Earth? And if that's the case, then wouldn't that technology be utilized and improvised to create the Necrosoldiers? So this is all quite interesting because of the fact that a lot of these offshoot information started popping up when Mars Chronicle came out. Some of it started even in Last Order, right? When Alita became a Last Order agent, when Alita met with Zeus and found out that there was more than one AI. and all of the things that are going on with Erica, for example, which started in Last Order. But a lot of this information is popping up. And many of you are starting to find that there are ties that can bring it in. It may not be exactly like what you have mentioned or what I have mentioned, but it does make sense that there can be ties that can be brought together. So it will be curious to see what happens in the future. And there is one more thing that I will say, is that Gala also mentioned, I'm sorry, I called you Gally just a few minutes ago, mistaking you as the Japanese name for Alita. But Gala also mentioned a very interesting suggestion of who the same may be. And it is quite interesting what he came up with. And I won't mention it here. If you want to know who Gala suggested as the same, I would suggest that you do use the link and go to his comment and read it from his comment itself, because there are a lot of information that goes into that. Now, there's also other information, such as go back to the Necrosoldier previous video and go down in the comments, and you'll see information by Stoppskylten and Reuben James Ramirez with regards to a lot of this things going on. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of good contributions that are coming up, and it's helping me at least get some idea that there may be some method to Kishiro's madness. And of course, as Kishiro is the creator of Destinova, madness is just another state of mind. So let's find out what his state of mind is and keep on reading the comic and figure out what he had as his objective. Okay, so that's about it for this particular video. If I do find some more interesting topics to talk about with regards to, heaven forbid, the Immortal Nostrum, or, the Necrosoldiers, or the Sane and the Oracle, and there are some stuff I do want to continue to talk about with regards to things like the Oracle and the Sane, so I'll probably do so. And when I do, I hope you join me at that time. But in any case, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any comments, please post it in the comment section below. And as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.